In this module, we're going to talk about thinking like a policymaker. Argument. An argument is a series of logical statements leading to a proposition. A proposition is a statement, so a claim about something. If you have a position on something that you believe strongly about, could be any kind of issue, you have a series of logical statements, or what we call a causal map, or a causal structure, if you like, leading up to that conclusion. An argument is based on concepts. So an argument on why poverty exists would be something that would have a series of logical statements leading to a conclusion. In the video that's in the modules online, it's considered to be an intellectual process. So what is that intellectual process? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this session. An argument is perspective, a point of view that one holds and is willing to defend. It is made up of a series of logical statements. It's designed to get you to believe in a series of statements with a logical progression leading to a conclusion. So what does that actually mean? Well, there are three key elements to any argument. The first is the propositional claim itself. It's a statement regarding the truth of something. Human beings are unique in that we want to understand whatever the truth is. We want to have a statement to support that truth. That statement is backed up by a logical series of propositions. Here's an argument here. I argue that all people are born of women. Okay, that's a fair argument. The justification for that is the second part to my argument. A justification is the reasoning behind my argument or the logical progression behind it. So every argument has reasoning inside of it. Based on reasoning and based on a logical progression of ideas to a conclusion, only women give birth. I then have to find support for my argument. My argument is based on evidence. It's based on empirical evidence or evidence from the natural world, evidence from experience, anecdotal evidence, evidence that can have many different shapes and varieties. Evidence is used to support my justification of the truth. And the claim, there are no recorded events of men having babies, could be true, but it might be untrue. But we could safely say our argument is only women give birth. Now, an argument often, as you saw in the video, the Monty Python video, is made up of a series of logical steps. So anything really can be made to be true. If you were to argue women don't give birth only, you might go to the animal kingdom to provide evidence to support your claim. You might have to look at particular cases that may exist that where men have given birth. I haven't seen one yet, but you may find one. If that's the case, then that logical progression needs to be supported. And the support, or the evidence if you like, quite often is the logic behind the argument. So where there is no physical evidence to support that, people often revert back to what they call logical arguments. Now, there are two different types of logical arguments that we use in this course. The first one is a warrant. These are taken for granted ideas that become logical because they are accepted. Like the common misconception that Columbus believed that the earth was flat. Columbus never believed that the earth was flat. Previous generations, going all the way back to the Greeks, had already worked out that the earth wasn't flat, so that's a misconception. But it's taken for granted that that's true because everybody believes it. Now, if everybody believes that it's true, it doesn't make it true at all. It just means that people have reached a logical conclusion where that's the case. They are accepted, i.e. the earth equals flat. Second to that are qualifiers, arguments that are qualified with evidence. Warrants are arguments based on taken for granted ideas. You can think of it like when a sheriff or a police officer goes to arrest someone, they put out a warrant. That warrant is a claim on that person's life. Taken for granted ideas are claims that people make. There are all kinds of claims. In any kind of business or organization, there's many different types of claims. The qualifiers, the arguments, that are slightly different than that because they're qualified with evidence. So a qualifier qualifies something with evidence. So I could say, statistically, it shows that 99.999999% of all men were born from a woman. A counter-argument uses evidence to challenge a proposition. So remember, earlier I said a proposition is a statement. So how does this play out in the work lives of most people? Well, we make an argument to further our position. So you start with what you believe is a useful position to have. That position is then countered by or supported by evidence. So evidence can take two forms. It can be a warrant, a taken for granted assumption that you create to get people to believe in what you're saying, or it can be qualified with physical evidence. Remember, it doesn't matter which one you pick, but every argument must be supported with some kind of reasoning. It can't just be, well, I think the earth is flat because I'm a wonderful person and I know everything. No, you have to have some kind of support for that argument. The structure of an argument looks like this. Let's just say we're arguing for X. X is true because of Y, and therefore we reach the conclusion, Z. So here's a famous example from a philosopher called Plato. So all people are mortal based on the reasoning that nobody lives forever. Okay, that's my first proposition. That's my first statement, okay, that supports X. X is my statement, sorry. X is my proposition. Here are my statements that support that. Here are my claims. Based on the reasoning that nobody lives forever, okay? We can't physically prove that nobody lives forever, so that's good reasoning. Number two, there is no evidence of immortality for humans that is not metaphysical, so we have to exclude or include religious ideas. I never anecdotally met an immortal person. I've never met the Highlanders, for example. So I conclude Z, that all people are mortal. Death is certain for everybody. It's not a really good way to, I'm halfway through the lecture here, so not a really good way to explain that. But think of it this way. If all people are mortal and all people have these characteristics, and this is a solid argument, to counter this, you would have to look at each one of my claims there and start pulling them apart or counterclaim them. And here's an example on the next slide. So I argue that complex problems are the best tackled through synthesis, not analysis. Okay, the justification for that is problems are socially created in complex settings, and we need to pay attention to how perspectives are used to create an argument. So another way of saying that would be everybody has a perspective based on a certain kind of reasoning. If you can pull that reasoning apart and look at what they're doing, then you may be able to figure out that the reasoning is faulty. You can have a different line of reasoning or a different set of ideas and have a better problem. I might use case studies to support my reasoning. I might use white papers. I might use other people's justifications, or I might demonstrate to people what I mean in advance. One of the most interesting ways and useful ways to win an argument is to use data to classify what you mean to others and show them pictures of things and get them to believe what you're saying before you present your conclusions. Now, that seems a little bit dodgy or a little bit manipulative, but it's not necessarily. It's just if something is right and you can demonstrate it to people and you can win them, then that's something entirely different. So in your assignment, we're going to do this exercise in class. But in your assignment, I ask you to look at how stakeholders interact. And I'm asking you to create an argument on how do stakeholders interact with each other. How does it work? How do they influence each other? How do they justify their positions? And so on and so forth. All right, and we will get to this example in class as well. So if you haven't watched this video, it's the second video. It's right underneath the first video on the course website. Have a look at it. We'll play it again in class anyway. Every claim must be supported by reasonable logic. Here's an example from Australia from a few years ago about the internet filter. This is a policy issue. So an argument has a series of logical progressions. So the argument, first of all, is a statement of position. That is justified and it is supported with reasoning and evidence. And then that leads you back to your conclusion. So it's circular in that way. So an argument perhaps reaches its conclusion through its own logical steps. Thank you for listening. Please navigate to the website and we will discuss this further when we meet in class. Thank you.